There we go. Okay, so hey guys, how's it going? So this is off topic slightly. It's kind of more to do with just life in Japan instead of me and my English school. School's doing okay. It's still a rather expensive time with Christmas coming and stuff. So things are okay. I can't complain. I'm kind of looking at next year as the time to really start saving and planning and stuff. Yeah, it's a good place to be. This video is about being married to a Japanese national. This is something that comes up quite a bit. When I was younger, living in Seattle, I knew a lot of different international couples, European, Asian, etc., American couples, and generally it's if you stay in the U.S. in the same kind of environment that you met, in my experience, things don't change too much. And that's just because there's not a lot of reason for them to. In my case, I met my wife in Seattle in 2004, which is quite a while ago now, and things changed dramatically. And I think the same is also true for foreigners who meet their wives or husbands over here. You can expect a fair amount of change post-marriage. The Japanese view of marriage it's said to be changing somewhat, a little bit, although albeit gradually. But at the time of filming, so to speak, this time, 2019, it's still very traditional. And what I mean by that is that marriage it's more or less seen as a way to kind of hedge your bets against old age. Essentially, it's about starting a family, managing a household, saving money, and then being prepared to stop working and everything that comes after that. You'll find that's the case in a lot of older societies, especially in Asia. Japan, it's very heavily influenced by Buddhism, of course, and Shinto is its only real indigenous religion. But just via kind of cultural import from China, there's a very strong Confucian element too, which means the family structure is very focused on things like education and maintaining the name of the family, and essentially just passing stability on from generation to generation, which was really what life was all about until recently, when we've become much more individualistic, much more focused on entertainment and having fun and freedom and things. So in Japan, very often getting married essentially means signing up for that, where for a lot of people it becomes a bit more like a business. If the parents are nearby, you can expect your significant other to be affected by them quite a bit. That they will have an influence, and once you have children, it can be a mixed blessing having in-laws nearby, because on the one hand, if the situation allows it, they'll be very involved in helping support the children and taking care of them while you work, as well as taking care of if it's the wife who's having children, at least, or the Japanese partner who's having children, at least. But there's also an element where you can kind of feel the culture can kind of the stronger undercurrents can kind of seep into the relationship slowly over time, and you'll find that it's not what it used to be. It happens quite a bit back home, but again, marriage in the United States it's mostly focused on the couple these days. Marriage for love is generally the majority of marriages are marriages of love. In Japan, it's a bit of a mix. Even if it is a marriage of love, there's still elements that kind of speak more to a marriage of necessity. Like you're going to go work, we're going to support the family, manage everything like a small business, essentially. So that can catch people off guard, especially foreign husbands. Myself, I think my wife she's pretty open-minded. We've, like any marriage, we've had our ups and downs, but by and large, she's quite understanding that I'm not Japanese, never will be, not interested in really even trying. So she understands that, and so do her parents. They respect the fact that I'm running my own business and I'm able to meet financial obligations for the family and blah blah blah. So. One thing that I would very, very strongly advise against is surrendering your living situation and moving in with your significant other's family. That still happens here a lot. It's not uncommon for people in their 30s and 40s and older to still be living, if not directly in the same building with one of the partner's parents, at least on the same property, which again speaks to the long history in Japan where people would essentially live in one farm basically for generations, and there would be the parents and children, and then the parents' parents, and eventually the parents' parents would pass on, and the parents' children would become parents, and it's kind of this cycle moving through the household. In its day, it was very practical. It was a lot of like subsistence farming. People lived much more simply, much more localized lives, and the culture evolved to serve that. These days, there's kind of some upset. There's just a massive exodus of young people from the countryside to the city. Who can blame them really? That's where the jobs are. That's where all the other young people are, and so on and so forth. So Japan is definitely facing some changes, but there are a few things in the culture, generally company culture and marriage culture, remain more or less unaffected. So it's good to kind of know what you're signing up for, and I would really recommend, if you're considering, marrying a Japanese national, pay attention to two factors. One is really what your partner is looking for. Do they essentially want a lifetime extension on the style of a relationship you have now, or are they looking to kind of enter into the typical Japanese marriage? And those are very different scenarios, so be really, really sure before you sign up. And then the second factor is basically the geographic location of the parents. How nearby are they? And if it's, driving distance, hour, half an hour, then it probably will be pretty minimal. But if they're living extremely nearby, you really need to kind of work things out with your partner and maybe lay down some ground rules, just to kind of hedge against confusion and the potential for toes being stepped on. Generally speaking, the Japanese are extremely skillful at diffusing situations and kind of sensing and understanding and adjusting to people's limits, provided you're clear enough in the beginning and give some kind of feedback. But there's no shortage of cases of foreigners just feeling like they're completely stuck and it's just a bizarre society. They had no idea this is what it was going to be like, etc. And that's unfortunate because the compound effects of that kind of situation over the years, they have a massive effect on your quality of life, your personality. Eventually you're just kind of just not a very pleasant person. I've seen that happen. And it can affect your health and even your kind of mental well-being if you're really living in a pressure cooker. So it's like anywhere else in the world, getting married is a massive commitment, but there's a particular nuance to it in Japan. It extends beyond the couple, and it's really marriage it's almost a symbol of kind of tying yourself into the communal culture and traditional standards of your local area. So it can really vary. I mean, in my situation, if we were married and living just 6 miles to the west out in the mountains, it would be completely different, right? Here in town, people are coming and going. It's more urban, although by Japanese standards, it's still pretty rural. And I think that's just because there's no large cities in the immediate vicinity. A lot of the cities in Japan kind of just bleed into each other. It's just this endless mass of urbanization. Here, where I am, it's a little bit different. It's kind of isolated by mountains and ocean, but essentially it's like any other Japanese city. So yeah, really, really, really look before you leap. If you're thinking of living in Japan long term and getting married, it's not guaranteed to be hard, but there are certain precautions you can take to ensure kind of a mutually beneficial, sustainable type of relationship. I've known a number of foreigners, actually the majority, to be honest, of foreigners, in my experience, who have married Japanese people here in Japan and stayed, have eventually gotten divorced, over 50% for sure. And I think a lot of it just comes down to the fact that they didn't really understand what they were getting into. In their minds, getting married was just a way to stay with their significant other. And then later down the road, they came to understand that it was also taking on a lot more that they probably may not have been interested in. So in the majority of cases, no, not actually the majority, there were a few cases where there were children, which is always hard, so it's like anything in life, you really kind of have to plan a little bit, but it's particularly true if you're removing yourself from your own culture and your own country, because it just immediately limits your options, and at the same time kind of magnifies the side effects of things. Back home, if your relationship doesn't work out, you can kind of step away from each other and kind of enter back into society. Here, it's a little harder if you get divorced and you have kids. That means either you're going to have to find a way to stay in the country as a single foreigner without permanent residence. That's can be tricky because it means you're probably going to have to work for somebody else, and there's a lot of issues there. And then, or it means you're going to have to go back home and hopefully you have enough, resources to be able to see your children regularly. So it is a situation that can be rather difficult if you don't know what to expect. So when I decided to marry my wife, I was in that camp, I just want to keep things how they are. I really love this girl. I want to stay together. And life without her doesn't seem like it would be as good as it would be with her. And luckily, I don't know, I guess I wouldn't say it was all just luck, but things worked out in a way where, my wife and I and her parents, were able to kind of work out a certain level of mutual independence and respect, and kind of focus on the stability of the family at large, without kind of binding ourselves too ridiculously strongly to the more traditional aspects like living together and just the kind of psychologically bizarre things that can come from that. So yeah, those are my words there. I'm not really speaking for or against marriage, but definitely as a foreigner in Japan, it's a different ballgame, I would say, than getting married back home, generally speaking. So you have to be even more clear with your partner about what the direction of the relationship is, and even more clear with yourself about what your life is going to look like in 10, 15, 20 years. As we get older, things tend to change, and again, when you're in a different country, it just becomes so exceedingly clear. You just realize, like, this is a big commitment, and it's not really a feeling of moving along with everyone else. In my experience, it's more a feeling of kind of going deeper and deeper into a decision you made a long time ago, and you're still kind of pursuing and creating the results of. So it's quite different. Okay, so that's that. Marriage in Japan.